Hi, Katie. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy Friday. We made it.
Happy Friday.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited to be here with you. You are such a powerhouse in the world as I think about PepsiCo and I think about media. I feel like you've been here for a very long time in terms of exposure and time in. So I would love to just give you a couple minutes to talk about what your background is, how long you've worked with PepsiCo and led their media team, and maybe since we had coffee the other day, tell us how many cups of coffee have you had today?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Brand Innovators, for having me. Super excited to be here. This is a great opportunity. Just to give you all a little bit of background about myself, I am at heart a media specialist. I started at a number of media agencies in New York, working on a bunch of different businesses from P&G to MCI WorldCom to Intel to Hardee's. So lots of different experiences. And then I joined Pepsi 15 years ago, which has been, I can't even believe it. It'll be 15 years in August. And it's been a phenomenal journey. The brands are great. The corporation is great. And for me, my career, which is unique, I'm not really a generalist, I'm a specialist. So my career has been at Pepsi in the media department the whole time. I've had the privilege and honor to work on basically every single beverage brand in the portfolio except Gatorade. They're based out of Chicago. But we've launched new brands. We have our big powerhouse brands. And the awesome thing about Pepsi is the only thing that's constant is change. So between our brands changing and the changing landscape of media, like it's just been a phenomenal journey. So I'm so lucky to be here and now leading the beverage group for media strategy and investment.
That's amazing. So awesome. Well, Chicago could use a little love. So if you want to hang out with me here, I'm sure Gatorade would be thrilled to have some additional support and firepower. In terms of I think what we've talked about from a Media Summit perspective, I've sat in some of these sessions. They've been incredible. I feel like a lot of the topic, right, of where we start is where we're at. So we're in this kind of middle pandemic, end of pandemic, we're getting there. But I think that the important part is like the effect that it's had on individuals, right? The way that we consume media, the way that society and consumers are interested in engaging with brands, our outlook, our attitudes have all shifted. And I think a lot of people have spent time talking about CTV and the impacts of CTV, and I don't want to not go there because I think we absolutely can. But I would love to understand, specifically with PepsiCo and your background in terms of always owning the streets. I feel like you guys are always in the right places at the right times in that event mindset of, you love our brand and we love you and you love this thing. So let's talk about it, or let's be here with you and be present with you. So question to you is, how are you thinking about and how have you navigated this like more homebound focused world that we live in, and what brands do you feel like have pivoted really well and kind of led your portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, last year was an unbelievable, crazy year for all of us, right? And hopefully we would never, ever have to go through it again. But I think there were some really good pivots and lessons, right, that we were able to do surprisingly, I would say very quickly. And there are a bunch of things that we thought about as consumers were not able to go out, scared to go out, right? And how do we get our brands to still engage and provide value? And quickly comes to mind two things that we did last year for Pepsi specifically, which we all know plays a tremendous role in music and live music, and even in broadcast events. Like it's just the DNA is music. So we quickly pivoted and partnered with Global Citizens to do One World at Home virtual concert, right? Which was a phenomenal experience. Celebrities, talent, artists all lined up. We partnered with our media partners, our social partners, like everybody really came together quickly to try to pull this off and really bring some entertainment value and escapism for folks at home. And it was a really great thing that we did. And I couldn't be prouder of the team for pulling that off. And then we did a second event around the election. And we know last year, again, very, very important for people to go out and vote and get their voices heard. And for us, we wanted to support that and say, hey, you know what, get out and vote, unmute your voices, right? So we partnered with a media partner called Triller, who we put on another concert for Pepsi, right? Like that's where we really excel. And that was another phenomenal thing where we were able to bring a great message of unmuting your voice, encouraging people in a time when we wanted people to go out and vote, a great positive message, and then using media and media partnerships to bring that to life. So all still at the comfort of your own home and being safe at your own home. So really two great examples of pivoting to the virtual world really quickly with a lot of, not a lot of learnings, but figuring it out as you go, which was phenomenal.
No, I think you guys did an incredible job. And as a consumer, as a person who participated in the events, right, it gave me something to do, which I feel like was also much needed in that moment of like, I mean, what were we, a month and a half into the pandemic? I mean, it was such a quick pivot. So incredible work there. As you think about kind of deepening that partnership and engagement moving into 21, what's your outlook look like now?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to continue the consumer engagement route. Pepsi has been on a roll with being part of culture, and that is definitely going to be a priority for us. And I know I'm only really giving examples for Pepsi, but it's important for all of our brands in the portfolio. But recent example that we just did coming out of February for the launch of our Pepsi Wild Cherry flavor was a game show with Fox. And that was, a really unique experience trying to bring the flavor of cherries, wild cherry together, and in a consumer engagement way. And it wasn't just about the broadcast show. Of course, we had a digital app. Consumers could play along with it. There were prizes to be run. Again, providing that value, but bringing it back to media, partnering with a powerhouse like Fox to unlock that and do that and help us produce it and co-build it and promote it. So really, really, I think you'll start to see more of those coming out of us, even more so than what we've done in the past.
That's awesome. So yeah, it was really phenomenal. And honestly, as a person that's so excited for the wild cherry flavor and even the mango flavor coming into this current launch, right? I think that's been such a great way to bring those alternate forms of Pepsi as you think about growing that category. So super cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Over the last couple of days, I feel like we've been talking a lot about CPGs and data and audiences and how we're thinking about that world. And I will do probably a poor job, but I'll try quoting Mike Scafidi, another one of your partners at Pepsi, yesterday. He spent a little bit of time talking about your first party data strategy and really thinking about how PepsiCo has been a global brand, right? So you have these big brands, but you also have built relationships. And I think you alluded to it here too, like you're a promotional company too, right? And so you have these relationships with your consumers and you really own those relationships. And so talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about audience and this harnessing this first party data that you have and a little bit into that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mike is the expert in the data. So I'm not going to get into technology and the sources there, but whatever Mike says that we should be using, I trust him. I know he knows it better than I do. So it's great to have that collaborative partnership at such a big company. But to your point, like we do have a proprietary data source called CDNA Data, which is a combination of data sources. Definitely our first party. Some of it is third party. Also, part of it is like where consumers are buying, what are their media habits, right? So it's really a holistic look for the consumer across the board. And we use this data from the start of campaign planning and helping feed in consumer insights, creative insights, all the way down through media activation. So actually importing this data to specific platforms to actually find them and reach them with the right message at the right time. So definitely an integral part of every media campaign that we do once we get up and running. Then in terms of like, it's not just set it and forget it, which I'm sure everyone doesn't do anymore, right? Then we get into real-time optimization. And even within the data, there's subsegments and there's behavioral attributes to understand what is working, what's not working. Can we serve different versions of creative and optimize it? And that is a very collaborative effort across the board with the brand teams, with our real-time optimization team, of course, with our agency partner, OMD, to try to understand what in real time is working and having those discussions to say, hey, we should shift to this, or we should shift to this. This isn't working, this isn't performing, and being able to do that. Then, of course, we wouldn't be a packaged good company if we didn't have mixed modeling, right, and ROI. So we also look at that. I mean, the lag time, I should say, is a little bit longer, right? And we have different data sources to understand what's the impact on the business. But from a media perspective, we have a proprietary tool that gets down almost to the partner level of how it is driving the impact of the business. So we can have those discussions with senior management, the brands, the key stakeholders to say, hey, this is really working, this isn't working, or we chose to do this for a different strategic reason, which is totally fine. But just understanding where it sits in the payoff of the business is critical to making our media plan stronger as we continue to evolve them.
That's so awesome. I love that. And I think, I feel like day one, there was some conversations around measurement, but I applaud you guys for taking that into your four walls and really having the responsibility there. I think so many CPGs, right? There's a lot of third party partnerships out there, but being able to harness that inside your four walls and knowing how powerful it has been across even just the work that we do with you all is incredible. So that is a bravo for that. As we think about kind of shifting into that, so measurement, right? Incredibly important, but also you guys as a brand company, that relevance and what we talk about, I think, as we think about big national media buys and then that localization. So you guys do that really well. And I'm curious if you're open to sharing a little bit about how you do it. Are there work streams internally? Have you thought about it differently and kind of help give us a scope from an outsider's point of view, look into why does it work for Pepsi and how are you getting that done?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a internal slogan that's nationally great, locally even better, right? So we know, to your point earlier, like being on the streets, connecting with our consumers is critical. And it's hard to do that when you sit in headquarters, right? So we have a division structure that enables and empowers our local teams to make decisions what is based on what is right for their market. So I would say, over the last 3 years, we just started this division. And like in any big corporation, there's a learning curve and there's challenges. But we are now getting to a place where we are really working together 100% to align marketing big bets, brand big bets, with the ability to then customize. And from a media perspective, we are now integrating our media agency, to be able to have that embedded resource to say, hey, I understand what Pepsi's doing on a national level. How do I take that and bring that to the North Division or the South Division? And what are their objectives? And is there synergies or opportunities? And is there able to customize it so we don't have to either reinvent the wheel again, or we just shift and lift with a little localization of a customization that really makes sense for their consumers in their market. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. We are certainly getting better at it. I think digital is a big unlock for us, right? Trying to figure out how do we leverage some of our big social platforms, both at a national level, at a local level. How do you manage frequency? How do you manage communication? What is that creative? So I think by having an integrated media team and an agency that has overview of all of that, they can help provide better recommendations and ways of buying that can unlock some efficiencies and ideally drive the business at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think as a partner, I can honestly tell you it's been such a refreshing it's just been so refreshing to work with your teams, both at that local level and all the way up to your expertise, right? And it's been incredible to see the localized teams become more and more aware of how media spending and buying works. And then also your teams be able to be connected there and kind of do the through line to make sure that everything's being communicated properly and that you're not, I think what we've talked a little bit about is like making sure that you're managing that frequency across the board.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And frequency is it's definitely a challenge. I'm sure a lot of advertisers are facing the same challenge. And I would add on to that that it's just not the local. Like we have an e-com team, we have a shopper team. So we are getting better at collaborating across all of media in the market to make better decisions and understand the bigger picture, right? The consumer doesn't know if it's coming from the e-com team, the media team, the local team, or whatever, right? So we really want to make sure that our plans make sense from the consumer perspective, and we are not over frequencing them, and we give them the right message at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's so important. And I think such an interesting thing as the retail media space continues to grow, right? And we continue to have more and more partnerships and kind of, I don't know, mandatory or retailer owned partnerships, right? And so making sure you're able to work with those teams alongside you is super important.
Well, it's interesting when your biggest customers are also media partners, right? So there's definitely an interesting dynamic from that relationship.
I absolutely, I can only imagine. So that's amazing. So cool. So let's shift a little bit to like, as we open up, right? So I can't believe I'm saying this, but we're halfway, right? Almost halfway into the end of the year, right? April 30th. And I was really, if I'm being honest, like I have been so optimistic, right? We're getting vaccinated and we're getting more out there, and we're seeing people, I think sort of have this, I was assuming kind of an unbridled, let's get out in summer. And if I'm being honest, from a research perspective, I think people are a little bit more cautious than I expected them to be, right? We're maybe a little used to our habits, or maybe we're not sure. But as you think about that kind of local economy and how important it is to your business, and kind of, we talked a little about the connectivity on the media side, but obviously there are channels that you guys play in that have been overwhelmingly hurt from a pandemic perspective, right? Restaurants and convenience and gas. How do you think about that in a, let's get people out and encouraging people to get out in a safe manner? And how are you thinking about media to help support and bolster those channels?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, even when the pandemic started, as we were trying to make sure our investments last year were being focused in the right areas, I'm going to go back to data, right? There's so much data available to say, where is traffic? Are people going to drugstores? Are people going to the gas and convenience stores? And then we also look at our own customers and understanding where they are. Are restaurants starting to open up? Which markets are they opening up in, right? So based on all of that data, we can then pivot our media plans to say, hey, we want to heavy up and geo-target in X, Y, and Z markets because we know they are moving around. Or we want to pivot our dollars into a channel like, a gas station TV or out of home that can really drive immediate point of purchase near our customers, so we can start to get that traffic in store. So there's a number of ways that we can do that. And we're at the heart of it is definitely going to be data, right? And I don't want to sound too cliche about that, but it is definitely something we look at to make sure we can ensure that we're going to drive those profitable channels for us.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think there's a perfect time to talk about linear and kind of the shift in where you're going, right? So help us get a sense of, if linear is, I don't want to say it's going away, because it's not. It's still a very important part of the media mix. But as you think about that effort and streaming and more addressability, talk to me a little bit about that shift and where your mindset is as you go to plan.
Yeah, I would say that, linear TV's been, dying for years now, right? And it's not going away. And I think there is a role for it. And it depends what that role is by brand. And looking at a holistic video strategy is what we're really looking at, right? So there is so much video content out there, and it's hard to figure out where all consumers are going. The new fronts is next week. Everyone's going to come out with original content, right? Like you have social content, you have digital, you have YouTube is phenomenal. Then you have your streaming services, and there's been an explosion of content, right? So I think you really need to focus on consumer trends. Of course, from a media perspective, you have to look at cost efficiencies, how to reach your target, where your target's at, and frequency. But then you have to really look at a holistic video strategy, which linear certainly plays a role in ours, as does live sporting events. You know, we're big supporters of, well, we have league partnerships with the NBA and the NFL, in-game sporting events. You know, last year, those were canceled. We had to pivot. They're coming back. You know, we know sports is a great time to reach consumers with our products. They're celebrating their teams, they're drinking, they're having a great time with our products. So we want to make sure we're going to continue to be in those spaces. So it's really a holistic look. It's not one or the other, but you know, if one is declining and consumers are shifting, of course, we're going to look to make sure that we're going where the consumer's going, so we can make sure we can reach them.
Yeah, and based on what we talked about earlier, right? Taking that ROI and looking at it internally. To understand and make sure that you're confirming your choices. So that's awesome.
Yep.
So I think as we shift into the last like 8 minutes or so of our time, I would love to give the audience of those watching, like, as we think about 12, 18 months from now, right? Mm-hmm. What are the big, and you know, we talked a little bit about this, like, is it the big idea? Is it the next best thing for them to do? But as you think about how to engage customers, like, what would you say people should think about right now? Right? So that they're in the position to be best suited for 12 to 18 months down the road.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that almost in two ways. One, like, our brands always have big ideas that they're thinking up, and I'm not going to give anything away on that front. So I'm going to put my media hat on 100%. And I think it's a challenge that we've always been facing, and it's the long-term, short-term play, right? So how do you make sure your brands play a role in culture and being part of the conversation? I think the last panel, Mark, someone asked about societal roles, right? Like, those are all different spaces that aren't your short-term ROI driving tactics, right? So there's always going to be a way to balance short-term with long-term, and trying to drive business, and then have the longer tail of driving equity, brand love. You know, those are all important metrics to us as well. So it's not a new challenge, it's just a constant challenge. And in the media landscape, where there's just so much fragmentation, it's just getting harder and harder to do so, in my opinion. So I think making sure that you balance that with your media mix for the next 12 to 18 months is critical. I think, and not staying true to it, right? In terms of like being flexible. And someone actually mentioned flexibility, is like, that is 100% true. Like, being able to look at your investments, be flexible, understand, and pivot in real time is something that we don't want to lose, that really the pandemic enabled for us, right? Especially with last year's change in upfronts, like, everyone pushed for more flexibility. And I think we're going to continue to do that. Like, flexibility is going to unlock that ability to manage short-term and long-term, and pivot as the business and the consumer, changes.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And as you think about that, are there specific channels in that flexibility, right? Are there specific things that you guys have tested or that you're really excited about in that new upfront mentality?
Sure. I mean, we have a very aggressive testing and learning agenda. Advanced video products, addressable products, being able to utilize TV, being able to utilize data to inform our linear buys, being able to use our data that gets imported into advanced TV platforms or advanced video platforms, 100%. We're definitely looking at all that stuff. But I would say we also look, to test within new ad products and offerings that our social partners have, and that YouTube has. It's across the board. Everyone is innovating, and we want to try and use as much data and new products as we can. And we just don't try it once, we try it multiple times, right? So the whole portfolio, that's the beauty of the company. We even have our Frito-Lay friends. They're testing and learning. We do a lot of sharing across the enterprise. This way, if we figure out one that's really working for the business, then we can all try to scale it up and make sense for the business.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I think as we think about is there anything, I guess, transparently, is there anything that you guys have tested and learned that you really thought worked really well for the business over the last couple months or year?
I think the OTT, the streaming, I think we are finding is definitely an effective medium. I think what we're finding, there's still cost implications and scale. And I'm hoping that as there's more platforms and more offerings in the marketplace, that we'll be able to, solve for some of that. I think that's probably the biggest unlock, which I'm sure a lot of other advertisers are facing as well. Especially since, Peacock just launched, HBO Max just launched, Paramount Plus just launched, like all of these are starting to come to the market. So we know it's a place we want to play in, but I think we just have to play in it smartly.
Awesome. We have a few more minutes, and there is, I think, what is a fun question in the Q&A. You've obviously had the pleasure of working on some very fabulous brands at PepsiCo. Do you have a favorite marketing campaign? Not a favorite kid, right? Not a favorite brand, but do you have a favorite campaign that you've worked on and or something that you're just super proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that I'm super proud of, a couple of years ago, we launched a brand new sparkling water, and it was, the name of it is Bubbly, which is doing phenomenal.
Love it.
It was a huge white space opportunity. Like LaCroix came out of the middle of nowhere, even though it's been around for years and years. And, we saw a real outage in our portfolio. So we're like, we're just going to go out and create one. So it was great to work with the marketing team to see that, the product, the packaging, the brand come to life. And then from a media perspective, how are we launching this brand? What's the right way to do it between, video assets, social assets, and getting the system excited and getting our customers excited. So that was just a really fun brand to launch. And I'm so happy that it's still doing so well. And we just launched an innovation this year, Bubbly Bounce, which has a little bit of caffeine in it. So try it if you like sparkling water. It's awesome. It's a phenomenal product.
No, I'm obsessed with it. And I just love how it fits so nicely into an everyday life, right? Like I feel like it hit that perfect consumer moment, that perfect time. And then also, just fun branding, like really fun branding. And you guys did such an incredible job of making sure that the media matched with the message. So that's incredible. Other things that I think as we round out, there's a couple more questions in here that I think might be easy, kind of broadly, as you think about the emerging channels and media channels or media space. How do you factor that into the overall strategy? So do you have an approach that you take in terms of the test and learn or do and learn, or how does Pepsi think about that in the bigger picture?
Yeah, I mean, we have a model which probably could be called a number of different ways of, it's almost like now, next, new, right? So what is happening now that's going to drive your business, and what's that percent allocation of investment that makes sense? What's next, which might be a little bit unproven, but definitely has scale. And then what's completely brand new, and what's that percent allocation? Some people have it the 10, 20, 70 rule, or it could be any variation depending on where you are in your investments and brands. But I would say, we always have to pull out some sort of dollars to invest in emerging channels, innovation. Otherwise, we're never going to learn. And at the same time, when business isn't doing great, that's also the first thing that tends to get looked at, that potentially is on the chopping block, which isn't great, right? But, our marketing department and our team, like, we really try to have a clear game plan and what we want to learn, and, to make sure it's funded appropriately, to make sure we can, plan for the future. We need to future-proof the business. So that's kind of the framework that we use.
Yeah, awesome. And I love that term. I think future-proofing has been such a great way to think about media as we go into it, right? There's been so many changes in the space and just so much evolution in these channels. As you think about the emerging products, do you measure them against the same benchmark? Or are you looking at different things as they move up into that? Like, how does something move from emerging to trusted, right? Is that good proof points, good performance, or is it something more intangible?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to compare it to, especially if we're thinking about ROI, emerging channels are just never really going to pay out for some things that have been tried or true, right? But we do look at other metrics, definitely. We use third-party sales lift studies, or if it's an equity study, get consumer feedback, understand what consumers are feeling about the product. Are ads being part of it? If it's a different ad experience. So we definitely look at other metrics 100%. And I think our expectation for the most part is when you're testing these channels and innovation, you're not going to return on your money in the short term. It's really a longer term investment to make sure that you're set up for success. So you have the learning. So when TikTok exploded, that you actually know how to operate on it and you know what best practices are, right? So I think that is critical to invest in that for the longer term payoff.
Totally. I think that's such an important conversation. And I can tell you as a partner of yours, it's such a refreshing conversation to have with all of the PepsiCo teams as we think about the way that you invest, whether it be across media or transparently when dealing with new brands. Like I'm sure that you have that same approach as you think about Bubbly just being the newest big kid, big kid on the block growing into that space. So really thinking about bringing in new tactics and new strategies. Do you tend to balance it across whether it's a mature brand or a new brand still taking, or do you take bigger risks on new brands?
That's a really great question. I think the established brands tend to have sometimes the bigger investment because they drive the bigger the more of the business versus innovation brands that you really have to invest in to grow, right? So I think it's a fine line. I would say we try to do it on both. And actually moving into this year and even the future, like we're trying to figure out, does some of our brands that even haven't had media, is that an opportunity to test, right? So we do have a number of innovation brands that just came out, Neon Zebra, Driftwell, but we also have brands like Mug that, we haven't marketed in a while. Like, what if we try and figure out a test and learn for that product and get some learning to say, hey, if we did this actually would help the business, or maybe it wouldn't help the business, but trying to think about it holistically across all the great brands that we have.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And such a good reminder of, those brands that are, how do you invest in a brand like a Mug, right? That, there's loyal customers out there, right? It's still very popular and it's got its loyal people. And is there an opportunity from a media perspective to think about investment? And then, I love that you mentioned Driftwell and Neon Zebra. I think those are such great new categories for Pepsi. So I'm so excited to see how you think about those as we go into the next year. Because I think the cocktail mixer space is such a rich space and something that you naturally played in but never leaned into before. So that's really cool. And then obviously Driftwell, that, issue that we all have with falling asleep. I can tell you last night was a rough one for me with a 7-month-old at home. Could have used a little bit more help than I had. So I think that's so awesome.
Yep. Absolutely.
Very cool. As we round out and wrap up, is there anything that you're most excited about, either from what you've heard here at the Brand Innovator Summit or what we've talked about, or even just as you look into the future, what are you most excited about post-pandemic?
Yeah, I mean,
getting out.
Yeah, from a personal perspective, I love media. I love the challenges. I love that the landscape is always changing. And I love our brand. So it keeps me going is just trying to figure out how to make that connection with our brands through media at the right time, at the right place, and really pull on the heartstrings, right? Like our brands teams do a phenomenal job with great creative. And then, I want to make sure that we can deliver that and it's received well and it's at the most cost-effective way so we can continue to drive the business. So I think